Ross just sucks. Hello friends, and welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily Reddit content anywhere on the internet. Promise, swearsies, it's just a fact and it's totally science. I implore you to look it up. Today we are jumping into some r/RPG horror stories. Yes, indeed. I got a little surprised at how well the Neckbeard video did yesterday, and I realized that my subscribers probably do want me to mix it up from time to time. If we're having 4 or 5 tales of neckbeards in a row, that ain't no good. Not good for me, not good for you. Everybody loses track of what's going on. It just kind of all blurs together. So we gotta mix in some goody good, some neckbeard adjacent content. So RPG horror stories it is. This is a ballad, an entire saga written by one person, and that is user Castle Bravo XVC. So big shout out to him. This is the complete ballad of Ross, the worst player that he's ever met. Which I guess we will pass our judgment on it as the story unfolds. It's probably gonna end up being 2 videos, but I'm in for that. I hope you guys are as well. I'll stop rambling now and we can just jump into the story. The complete ballad of Ross, the worst player I ever met. I think I just said that. Names, even Ross's, have been changed. Over the course of a week, I had written about Ross quite a bit. As a final catharsis, I decided to collect all of those works into a single thread while having a bit of fun with the whole endeavor. I present to you the complete ballad of Ross. There's something bad in the neighborhood. D&D getting stressful. Just need something good. Call up Ross, call up Eric, and got together when we could. Allocate skills. Character sheets filled, awaiting thrills. You know the drill. Eric makes a background to get started. Ross half-hearted, babble nonsense assorted. It's kind of a slant rhyme, but I'll allow it. Okay, Ross, you're the boss. You can make whatever you want. No backstory? Don't be sorry. Let's just hurry without worry. The whole point is to have fun, son. Make it up while on the run. But if you don't bring none and can't get it done, don't get mad when we all taunt. OP, man. He's not necessarily a poet, but I appreciate the effort. Ain't got no moves, no points in brawn, so I disapprove using your wand. Proton sparks flying through the air. Taxi cab don't seem to care. Opportunity for ingenuity never seized. Acting with impunity makes disunity and everyone displeased. Eric rolls with the punches and plays on his hunches as Ross just watches the exorcism. Into the cab he launches, the meter he rushes, suddenly not haunted by Ross's pessimism. Oh, exorcism, pessimism. I got you now. Reddit is cautious with their conscience, seeing Ross taunted. What if he's a victim of nepotism? Ask what the cause is. It's not autism. Truth is, he botches the concept of Darwinism. Ross just sucks. Well, it wasn't the greatest introduction by OP either, but okay, let's go ahead and check out the first Ross story. Player kills Ghostbusters RPG in the first session. All the both names have been changed. Ross was terrible. Just seriously, the worst. I was only roommates with him because I felt sorry for him at the time. I spent the next 6 years feeling sorry for myself. When I'd, in effect, adopted him into my social circle, my friends tolerated him for my sake. He was a terrible role player. The list of examples is endless, and quoting some infamous incidents years later is still shorthand among my friends for don't be dumb. I had a friend Eric that lived in the same building as us, and in between the irregular D&D games that the entire group played in, I figured that the 3 of us could do something light. Enter Ghostbusters, the RPG. I love RPG. I love schmarmy, funny games when appropriate. I love Ghostbusters, and I am more excited for this than I have been for anything in a long time. I walked the 2 players, Ross and Eric, through the basics of the game and character creation. I only set 2 expectations. I would like them to play fictionalized Mary Sue versions of themselves, buying into the franchise, in our home city, and that oftentimes creative or humorous thinking is the key. Everything else we could figure out as we go, because this is supposed to be a light, fluffy distraction between our regular games. Eric decides that he's an architect, a longtime passion of his. For his backstory, he encountered a ghost or curse on his dig, and that later brought him into the franchise. Great, simple, and it hangs easily together. Ross is making a big tech character. He fancied himself
quite the technocrat.
I suggested that he could have answered a want ad to manage the equipment and containment systems, what I thought to be a simple but very Ghostbusters-ish backstory. You would have thought that I just told him that I kicked his cat off the balcony. He was pissed. I had never actually seen someone be sullen before. Until my death, when I mentally define sullen, I will eternally think back to that moment. Ross starts complaining about
why he can't make his own backstory. Why did Eric get to make his own backstory?
Jeez, okay. Ross usually wasn't one to have much of a plan, but I figured if he was making such a big deal about this, he must have put a bunch of thought into his character. Okay, my bad. Please, what did you have in mind? Despite this happening over 10 years ago, the words he said that weekend afternoon are seared into my brain.
Well, I figure I'm a hacker and I was on the web hacking. And I found something.
My years knowing Ross had taught me to keep my expectations low, but wow. Just wow. I gently, oh so gently, asked how that led him to becoming a Ghostbuster with Eric. I would have accepted literally anything. I just wanted to go, but having something simple to play off of would be nice. Maybe he encountered a techno demon, or he found out that someone had applied for a Ghostbusters license in the city and sought them out. Maybe him and Eric were friends in-game already. Maybe anything. But
I don't know,
was all I got. So I gently, oh so freaking gently, offered a series of suggestions, much like the ones above, to which Ross replied,
fine, whatever. I answered an ad then.
Cool. Great start. They get a call. The police are reaching out to them because there's what they suspect to be a haunted taxi running rampant through a chic outdoor market area.
All right, Ghostbusters, let's roll.
Sure enough, there is a rampaging taxicab, barricaded into an outdoor market by the police. They try to proton pack it. Eric hits, having made a well-rounded character. Ross misses, having put only the minimum points into his proton pack. The cab driver and the cops start screaming at them for damaging private and public property. Eric figures pretty quickly that shooting the taxi probably isn't what they should do. He starts talking to the cops, and then the taxi driver, and then the passenger in turn. During and between the conversations, I keep asking Ross what he's doing. Each and every time I get the same response. He sits there, deep in thought, gets this pissy look on his face, and says,
he can't think of anything else to do.
So he shoots his proton pack at the cab, misses, gets yelled at by the cops. Despite Eric in character pleading with him to try something else, Ross just keeps doing it. Despite the police pleading with him, same thing. Despite the taxi cab driver pleading, same thing. Despite Eric and me out of character pleading, same goddamned thing. During all of this, Eric figures out that the passenger was smuggling a statue that apparently houses a demon, and because it was already extremely clear to him not to just shoot at the goddamn thing, he attempts to jump into the rampaging taxi. He doesn't get it on the first few chances, but he eventually does manage to jump through the window and get into the front seat. All the while, Ross is repeating the same process, getting more and more angry and having less and less fun as the time goes on. How boring must it be to play with this guy? He's like a brick wall. Eric eventually turns off the taxi's meter, exorcising the demon from the car. A chuckle-worthy solution for what should have been a quick, chuckle-worthy session. I hand them the bill. They would have been paid $5,000 for taking care of the taxi cab, But with all the property damage, they're in the red and will be taken to court if they don't pay. This is an actual mechanic of the RPG. Damn, that makes me kind of want to play the Ghostbusters RPG. Eric had a blast. Ross was almost in tears because he was so angry. His feedback was less than constructive, amounting to just some whining.
He had no intention of playing again.
This wasn't the worst of that player. Honestly, there's too many examples for one single post. When I tell stories of Ross, both from D&D and in real life, I honestly don't think that people will believe me, because no one could be as frustratingly stupid as he. But no, I couldn't make up Ross even if I tried, and this wasn't even his worst. It was just a good example of who he was and how he ruined something that I was excited about. TLDR. Well, despite OP's inability to write a decent poem, he seems able to run a good campaign. That Ghostbusters thing sounds extremely fun to me. I feel kind of bad that Ross basically insisted on ruining the entire thing just because he's like, I can't think of what else to do. Well, use your brain, dude. Look at what Eric did. He's talking to the cops. He's trying to figure some stuff out. Just standing there shooting shit isn't going to work. And that's how you know that it was a well-built encounter. Imagine if they had walked up to the ghost taxi cab, shot it with a proton pack, and just, that's it. Encounter's over. Congratulations, you won the prize! There's no sense of accomplishment there. That's got to be the lamest encounter ever. Ross seems like an extremely two-dimensional human being. I'm more partial to OP after finding out about how he does with DMing. He seems like a pretty chill dude. Eric seems like a pretty chill dude. Ross does not. I do love the fact that he got like angry and frustrated just because he can't think of anything else to do. Like, that's your problem, bro. That thing on top of your shoulders is not just a hat holder, okay? Or maybe it is in Ross's case. I don't know. But anyways, let's jump back to the main post, read on through the poem, and then we'll probably get to another story.
But memories of an invisible pig cause my heels to dig and hitch his rig to mine. Ross, the chance is yours. Run some Star Wars. I'm sure it will be fine.
See, I'm trying to spice up the poem with a little voice.
No plot or encounter. It's already a downer. When we meet a gal named Mary Sue. At the goal line, we see a chrome shine as the simulation completes. Oblivious to the obvious, he lobbies with us, with cockiness our opinion as we sit aghast in our seats. And though just a hobbyist, I feel a little nauseous, and my decisions I do rue.
Rue the day.
Useless I don't think Ross is. Prove my hypothesis and make right what once went wrong. Given time, he promises, and execution so flawless that will praise his talents in song. At a convention we shall congress. He staves our reconnaissance and says that our trust isn't wrong. But it's quite the opposite. The Stargate is ominous, and his failures we now spread in song. Ross still just sucks. GM runs 2 separate Star Wars adventures and fails to prepare literally anything. That's not too bad if you're creative. I've seen GMs run a proper game with just a piece of paper in front of them that says something dumb like frog in a top hat. Okay, at some point in this adventure we'll probably encounter a frog in a top hat, and then it never happens. And I realize that they've been making everything up this entire time. And I'm impressed by that. Given our experiences with Ross, I don't think that's what's going to happen, if indeed he is the GM. Anyways, names have been changed. I'd already posted once about Ross, we just read it, but boy howdy is there more. Ross loved Star Wars. Ross had played RPGs before I met him. You figure Ross could run a Star Wars campaign. Oh boy, here we go. You'd think, and you'd be wrong. I met Ross at a job and invited him to a Dungeons & Dragons game that I was joining, back before I realized how insufferable he could be. I look back on those days, remember myself, and just think, you poor, ignorant bastard. So Ross plays Dungeons and Dragons with us, and he's not great. He's played RPGs before, but he's quiet, and he doesn't really roleplay. Oh well, people are good at different things, I guess, and it takes people some time to come out of their shells sometimes. The game itself was okay, and we actually had fun enough. Actually, one incident stands out as one of the best D&D memories ever. The phrase invisible pig has become shorthand for overthinking a plan way too much. Well, at least we did have fun enough that when Ross says
he'd like to run a Star Wars game,
me and another guy named Fritz agree. Ross had us get together a couple of weeks later at Fritz's house. I made some type of tech guy, and I can't remember what Fritz made. It was like 15 years ago, sue me. Ross had given us no indication what the game will be like, so I have no expectations whatsoever, and even those could not be met. So basically, we're rebel troopers being landed in the middle of a battle. Okay, going for gold. Our objective is to get to a bunker. There's no combat, no RP. The only skill check is when I ask if I can tap into Imperial frequencies. We're getting close to the bunker when suddenly a squad of stormtroopers surrounds us. Oh, I see. We're gonna be captured, then we'll probably have to escape. Maybe we'll meet someone and have to free them or get a message out. I see where this is going, and I like it. Except, that's not where it was going. Suddenly, a Jedi jumps out of the bushes, and she immediately kills all of the stormtroopers with a pink lightsaber that Ross made great effort to draw our attention to.
Look guys, the lightsaber's pink.
Okay. And then with this Jedi, who's the only thing in the game that has gotten any type of description so far, standing before us atop a pile of dead stormtroopers without suffering a single hit, holding out her pink lightsaber before her. Seriously, he kept emphasizing it. An electronic voice rings out around us. Simulation complete. And we're in a holodeck. Fritz and myself, at some point from getting onto our shuttle to being dropped off on the planet, had entered a holodeck. This was all apparently a test to see if we qualified for a special mission under the Jedi. Okay. Still don't know how we passed a test when all we did was walk into an ambush and get saved, but I'm not Rebel Command. Listen, I'm a Star Wars and Star Trek fan, so I know what belongs in each and which doesn't, and I'm willing to forego any fandom expectation in the name of fun. Holodecks and new Jedi in the middle of the original trilogy? Okay, we're in an alternate universe. I have no problem accepting that, I guess, but there is going to be fun, right? Right? Well, that was the session, turns out. 1 hour of gameplay in its entirety. Oh my god. Okay, I guess this was a kind of session 0 or something. What can we expect from the next adventure? Glad you asked, because Ross definitely shared. The game, as he saw it, would be a series of missions and adventure that his character, yes, not an NPC, his personal character, would go on, and we would have to support. Lame. He took special care to explain
that he'd played his character for a long time. It had super high stats, and a special lightsaber, and an X-Wing completely plated in chrome.
Because all of that mattered, apparently. Benefit of the doubt still given, I guess. Maybe this will be like a deconstruction of the RPG genre. Like, maybe we'll be shining a spotlight on support roles, and while the hero goes on adventures, we get to follow the B team to do stuff that needs to be done for the hero to complete their mission. I mean, I'd be down for that. So I ask. Nope. Ross plans for us to literally follow his Jedi around, watching her do stuff and being saved by her. Jesus. This sounds so awful. I politely tell Ross that I'm worried that the game would just be us following a Mary Sue around to see how cool they are. Ross doesn't know what a Mary Sue is, so I explain. And as I do, I see him deflate. Like, I thought that was a turn of phrase until I saw Ross literally do it in front of me. Because indeed, following his character around and watching how cool they are was exactly what he planned. When I suggested that maybe a game where we did our own missions and that his character kind of popped in and out of might be more fun and give us more to do, he just said sadly,
he'd think about it.
There was no session 2. That might be a mercy. That was the day that I learned to set my expectations a bit lower for Ross than regular humans. But that was the only time he ran a Star Wars
adventure.
And I use that word as sarcastically as it can be used. A couple of years later, we're roommates. He wasn't all bad, I guess, at least at first. There's a convention coming up at a hotel that a friend Eric had run a one-shot at the year before, and Ross wants to run a Star Wars session. Fool me once, bro, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Now, when he said those words, I had like a Vietnam-style flashback. Only with disappointment instead of burning villages. So I cautiously feel him out and make sure that he'll A, have enough material to last a few hours, and B, won't have us just following around a Mary Sue.
No problem,
He assures me.
it'll be awesome.
So we all gave him the benefit of the doubt. Really, this was our fault at this point. Ross had months to prepare. He kept giving us updates that
He's got something really cool planned.
Ross is the kind of person who could recite the entire expanded universe off by heart, so I figured he could pull a few ideas together to at least make a nice evening of it. Well, the day of the convention comes. A few of the regular circle and a random stranger get together to play Ross's Star Wars game. What we played or who was who would be completely unimportant, even if I could remember it, which I can't. I suspect that my mind erased most of that experience from my brain in self-defense of my sanity. I can only remember snippets, like a half-remembered episode of some children's show that I hadn't seen since my youth. The plot, in its entirety, involves us landing on a planet, walking over to an abandoned temple, and being sucked through a Stargate. Like, a Stargate. From Stargate. We landed. We walked over to the temple. We entered the temple. We saw a Stargate. I activated it. We all got sucked in, and that was it. Beginning, middle, and end. Fin. What? Where do we come out, you might ask? That's a great question. And we thought it was a great question too, which is why we asked it.
I haven't figured that part out yet.
Ross replied. What the fuck? Is this the big cool thing that he had planned? It had to be. There's nothing else. It's just a sheet of paper that says temple and Stargate on it. Months! He had months to prepare that. Total playtime amounted to about 30 minutes, 20 of which was some interpersonal RP before we landed on the planet. I'm still incredulous to the fact that this was what he had accomplished in months. We hadn't asked him to run it. We checked with him multiple times. He seemed genuinely enthused for months. And this was all we got? The convention was a weekend long. No one had brought anything else to play, and no one had anything prepared. We spent a lot of downtime at the convention just bumming around playing Game Boy. Ah, you ruined it, Ross. Ross never GM'd anything again, to my knowledge. He may have offered, I can't remember, but no one took him up on that offer, that's for sure. And I wish that this was the last time that Ross had so completely disappointed all of us during an RPG game, but unfortunately we hadn't really learned our lesson yet. TLDR. Also, okay, a few people have asked about the invisible pig. It's nothing big, just a dumb example of overthinking a plan, and the chaos that can ensue for not spending time on the important details. It was 2nd edition. The group was an archer fire salamander race from Dragon Magazine, a warrior mole from Dark Sun, a mage swame from the Humanoids Handbook, and a cleric halfling. Long story slightly shorter, evil is afoot in mass, and we're supposed to get from X to Y, but we learn offhandedly by the DM that there be necromancy in their nearby town, as an example of the dastardly evil that was afflicting the land. So of course we immediately lose the plot and just focus on that. We learn a mage who runs a shop is behind the necromancy, so we decide to confront him. It'll be hard to get the drop on him, and we definitely needed the drop because he was much higher level than us. The DM was heavily hinting that we shouldn't do this in many, many ways. And like good player characters, I promise you that he was thoroughly ignored. Poor DM. So we want to distract the mage, but how? We settle on the idea of throwing an invisible pig into his shop so that it'll squeal and run around and knock shit over. We reason that if we were someone who ran a shop and suddenly an invisible pig started losing its shit randomly one day in our store, that we'd be very surprised. To this day, I maintain that that logic is sound. It is. So we buy a pig, because we don't already own one, and we're about to cast invisibility on it when we run into a hitch. What if it's all calm and docile when we throw it in? A calm invisible pig will surely be less surprising than a panicked invisible pig. Surely. So we'll smack it on the ass. But won't that break its invisibility? We'll smack it on the ass, then cast invisibility on it, and then we'll throw it into the shop. It's about this time that I should mention my cleric in 2nd edition. One of the kits that you could take was pacifist. Though in adventure, I refused to do any harm and could actually lose my clerical abilities if I did. I played him like a kindly country doctor. I steadfastly refused to slap that pig's ass. That's a new sentence. Or maybe it's not. Without first casting Stone Skin on it as a safety measure. Right before a battle with a high-level foe. We'd already sunk 2.5 hours into this plan at this point, so everyone just kind of agreed. So to recap in full, the plan was this. We'd cast Stone Skin on the pig. The mole would go in and pretend to be shopping and get into melee range. The cleric would smack the pig's ass, using up one of the Stone Skin effects, and the Swanmay would quickly cast invisibility on it. The Swanmay would then enter the shop so that the cleric could throw in the goddamn pig after her and set all hell loose. The archer would be on one side of the door, primed to shoot the mage. And that's exactly what we did. And that mage went down, because the mage was only level 3. The cleric in there with him, however, was extremely high level. Yeah, we never scouted the shop. And when townspeople talked about the high-level magic user in the mage shop, we never figured that, a cleric could possibly be the one raising the dead. Got him! Technically, the plan was a success, as the mage was very surprised. Is it a TPK if the DM raises us to torture and interrogate us? Not at all. You did this to yourself. There was like a bonus story in there. That was pretty sweet. Again, this OP writes words a lot better than he writes poems. I really like his writing style. He's able to easily convey the amount of confusion and dismay and anger that comes from somebody being like, yeah, I'll totally DM a game for an entire weekend. And then they play 30 minutes of it and the DM's like, yeah, I don't know. Ross is totally two-dimensional. It's hilarious how much creativity he lacks. And there's not a problem with lacking creativity, obviously. There's some DMs that aren't necessarily comfortable flying by the seat of their pants, but they will prepare far in advance. And if you're given months to do it, and know for a fact that these players are going to be with you for at least a couple of days expecting to play this game, why would you not prepare something? You basically just ruin the entire weekend because nobody else wants to step up and DM and just make up an adventure. So everybody ends up just sitting around playing their Game Boy instead of playing the tabletop RPG that they probably came to the fucking convention to play. Ross! Oh, what a horrible sweat stain of a human being. It is funny though. Some of the blame has to go on OP because he just keeps putting himself in the situation and being like, I don't know how this happened. Bro, dude, bruh, you should have seen this from a mile away. Ross just sucks. No! And of course, we open it up with the Ballad of Ross, which is sort of a ballad. It's more like a stilted poem, but I'll cringe my way through it. If you haven't seen the first couple of parts of the Ross ballad, that is in the description as per usual. And let's jump into it. Battle brings redemption and apprehension. From dying a glorious death, a second chance beholden, a new lease emboldened. But all he does is weep.
I want to be Asian on this occasion, as it's my character's foundation.
And through oration, he wallows in stagnation with a new elation.
The ring of being Asian shall I seek.
Whatever makes you happy, dude. I'm not your pappy, dude. I'll make it happen, I guess. Your journey continues to your homeland. It brings you far from the west. The east? And there, with wealth that could cripple a kingdom, you forge your mighty artifact. Congratulations. Drained of all income, upon your finger you now wear a crest. If you feel attacked, you are in fact. Because we think you've cracked and I'm out of tact, Ross just sucks. Player has a tantrum because he wasn't Asian after Reincarnation. Any names have been changed. Before we get further, I need to clarify something. Ross is white. Ross is painfully white. I'm like really white, but compared to Ross, I might as well have been a mix of every ethnicity that wasn't white. Ross was the source from which the concept of Caucasian spread from, like Hutterite off the farm kind of white. All right and all white, and now that that's been cleared up, we can continue. So what you're saying is he's a weeaboo. All right, crystal clear. So I'd been DMing a 2nd edition campaign for a couple of years. I've got an old school mindset of hard battles and slow progression. So when I say my group was mid-level, I need to clarify that this was a hell of an accomplishment. There hadn't been a player character death in a long time, and so my group had become pretty confident in their abilities. The group consisted of a human bandit, an elven cleric, who I've incorporated into my current world's lore as some of the best and most epic character development that I've ever been privy to. A human mage, a human bard, a human samurai, played by Eric, a friend mentioned in another game, and Ross's human ninja. 6 players, goddamn. The halfling might have been a member of the group by that point, I can't remember. Now, following their encounter with destroying an evil dragon's soul, that's definitely an uncomfortable Ross story that I'll get into another time, the group was traveling through some frigid mountains, trying to find a pass to a southern homeland of 2 of the player characters, the samurai and the ninja. They eventually come across a small community of humans in the midst of funeral preparations. A young girl in their village had recently passed. Through conversation, the village elders reveal that they guard a sacred tomb that holds great power and great evil in turn. Occasionally, adventurers enter the tomb, but none leave. They're tasked to ensure that no evil escapes. All too tempting, the group enters. Which is all well and good, as the tomb contained my most elaborate dungeon ever crafted, a multi-level puzzle and monster-filled labyrinth that featured a number of magical items to prepare them in facing a final, deadly challenge, and a way to pass through the mountains, but that was beside the point. The group enters. They struggle with a few puzzles while having some genuinely tough encounters. Sven the Lore Master is a feather I'm particularly proud to have in my cap, even if it led to the mage accidentally becoming an Ifrit, which seriously put a monkey wrench into my plans, but fair's fair. Through the dungeon, they'd found 2 magical items designed to protect them against their final encounter. One was a ring that prevented life-draining attacks, and the other was some type of item that protected against cold attacks. This was over 10 years ago. You can't expect me to remember every detail. I mean, come on, cut me some slack. I don't expect you to remember every detail, but I do expect you to make it up. Entertain. The 2 frontline player characters, the bandit and the samurai, each take one. The bandit takes the ring of life drain protection, and the samurai takes the cold thing. Just gonna call it a ring, even though I'm pretty sure it wasn't a ring. They get to the final chamber of the dungeon and encounter a cryohydra and a wraith. Now, anyone who's played old school Dungeons & Dragons knows that there are few ways to mess up an adventuring party quite like throwing a wraith at them. Every hit, without save, permanently drained experience levels. I'd encountered one as a player character myself, and I went from level 9 to level 3. This can be devastating. I figured that a second threat to divert their attention
but also a magic item to protect the primary target would make for a nice balance and present a good challenge. Why? Why would you throw a wraith against them? I mean, you did give him the ring and stuff, but you just can't expect player characters to have the same line of thought that you do. It would have been a nice balance. See? It would have. If only the player characters had thought things through for even a moment. The bandit, who was protected against life-draining attacks, made a straight line for the cryo-hydra. The samurai, protected against cold attacks, then went for the wraith. My friends were not burdened with an overabundance of sense. I mean, they should have brained it out a little bit more, but it seems punishing. So the fight's a little rougher than they expected. The samurai and the ninja die. But I'm not a cruel dungeon master. I taketh with one hand and giveth with another. In the loot they find 2 scrolls, one of resurrection and one of reincarnation. To be as fair as they possibly can be, the party randomly decides who gets what. The samurai gets resurrected, Ross's ninja gets reincarnated. To avoid him being reincarnated as a badger or something, I just let him know that he will be reincarnated into the body of the nearest humanoid, which just so happens to be the body of a young Viking girl outside, which is perfect because he was playing a young girl to begin with. God, why is that always such a red flag? Creep's always rolling up these young girls in D&D. Stop it. Get some help. I didn't plan it, but it worked out, right? Now this is where the horror begins. As Sophia might say, picture it. Sicily, 1922. Ross was the oldest among us in the group, the most mature, if you will. We wouldn't, but you might. A 30-year-old man sitting there on the couch, surrounded by friends, on the verge of tears. Because his character is being reincarnated as something other than a teeny tiny Japanese girl. That's wild. Now, at that time in my life, I'd never expected that there would be a point that I would need to console someone 5 years my elder just because they could no longer pretend to be a Japanese girl. Life comes at you fast. The Scandinavian features of this ninja's new body were just
completely unacceptable.
And so we all just sat there, uncomfortable. So I decided to show him a silver lining. Early in the dungeon, there had been carvings indicating that the dungeon was protected by bears. The reason for that is that the human clan were actually werebears. We're just shoving all the neckbeard tropes in. It ain't a werewolf, but it's damn close. Might be cooler than a werewolf, actually. So, yeah, congratulations, you're a werebear now, Ross, with all the benefits that come with it. Cool bear form, immunity to non-magical attacks, etc. It mattered not. If Ross couldn't pretend to be a Japanese girl, then what point did D&D even have? Oh, Lord. So, we ended the session there. It seemed like a natural end to the day. Everyone kind of shuffled out of Ross and mine's apartment, and for the next few days, Ross indicated that
he didn't think he'd play anymore, as the game was no longer fun for him.
So, we played, and still do, minus Ross, bi-weekly. So, about a week before the next session, I've prepared everyone that Ross might not be joining us further, to which everyone was as disappointed as I'm sure you'd expect them to be, but then the hypotheticals start coming. Ross starts asking a few questions here and there over a few days, thinking that he's being cagey or clever.
Are there magic items that let you look like someone else? Are those effects permanent or temporary? Are there items that would change his appearance permanently if it wasn't meant to disguise him as someone specifically? If there isn't such an item, could one hypothetically be commissioned for enough gold?
Etc., etc., etc. I, of course, saw where this was going long before Ross shared his cleverly laid plans, and was disappointed all the while.
Ross isn't exactly a master of deception, but I am proud of him for plotting his own plans and having original thoughts, which seemed to be something that he was having trouble with in the first 2 parts of this saga. So yeah, Ross talked himself out of quitting D&D because he now had a new mission in life for his currently Scandinavian ninja. As the gods as his witness, he would be Japanese again. Turning Japanese, I really think so. Cool, that's the important thing, I guess. With a single-minded determination that I might have admired if the goal had been anything other than what it was, Ross set out to make his ninja Japanese again. And thus, using all the wealth his character had accumulated over a not insubstantial career, Ross commissioned a magical ring when they reached a major settlement. The cost was substantial, as arcane magic was rare outside of a few areas, and thus did masters of arcane secrets and smiths trained in the lost arts work together to create a powerful new magic item, previously unseen in the world, the legendary Ring of Being Asian. Oh god, that's hilarious. Imagine you open up a treasure chest and find this magical artifact, and you're like, what does this ring do? Oh, it turns me Asian. Oh, that's silly. Now, I've seen children open up Christmas gifts from Santa containing exactly what they had asked for, and saw less joy in their faces than the joy that I saw when Ross got that ring. The only thing that I can liken it to is if someone had been atheist their entire life, and then upon hearing their first sermon, realized that their entire life until that moment had been absent, a critical piece, but now was made whole. Weird comparison, but okay. It still saddens me that the concept of spiritual ecstasy will forever conjure the image of a pudgy nerd crammed into a Neo jacket like an overstuffed sausage, but life leads us to all sorts of places that we never thought we'd go. Ain't that the truth? This isn't the most horrific of my Ross stories. Oh no, there's the equivalent of 2 TPKs still ahead, but it is the most Ross story. Like if I were to tell a D&D story to someone for the sole purpose of trying to define who Ross was, this would be it. A 30-year-old man mourning the loss of his Japaneseness. Imaginary Japaneseness at that. And I still can't believe I let this crap go on. I'm not mad with myself, just disappointed. I expected more from me. TLDR. I do feel a little bit conflicted about this story, you know? The fact that a 30-year-old man wants to play a Japanese girl is already a giant red flag. The fact that he can't accept being anything but a Japanese girl, he goes on like this mystical magical quest in order to become Japanese again. So ridiculous. Do you know how cool a Viking ninja werebear sounds? I would have totally embraced that, but it seems like this guy just couldn't. I'd like to point fingers at OP and be like, oh, you were kind of shitting on this guy's fun, you know? But at the end of the day, there were 2 scrolls. Resurrection, Reincarnation. He lost the role. Now, I can understand having a personal identity for your character and knowing what you want that character to be, but shit happens, you know? That's what D&D is all about. Improvise, adapt, overcome, and whining at the dungeon master trying to make things different shouldn't be a reason to give players what they want. It's like, oh, actually there was an Asian for some reason in this Scandinavian village. And she was the closest one. Congratulations. No, the dungeon master played it as he saw fit, which might be more douchey than it needed to be, you know? Like, you didn't mock him in the moment, but you're definitely mocking him after the fact. But then again, on the other hand, you did let him create the Ring of Being Asian, so I guess I can't be too mad about it. And it also forced Ross to think critically, which seems to be something that he doesn't do very well, as evidenced by the first 2 stories, as I might have mentioned. The post does kind of lean hard into turning Ross into a punching bag. I mean, he's definitely an inept human and not a very socially aware human, but he likes what he likes, and at the end of the day, it is a fantasy game and everybody should be there to have fun. And OP let him have what he wanted. So I guess I can't fault OP too hard in this one, but I guess we'll see how things devolve further as we progress into the fourth story. But of course, we got to get that shitty poem out of the way first. So let's do that. And so the song continued, holding a single note, and all the while he's happy. For a moment, subdued. Forbidden love, he wrote. Now everyone suspects him wacky. Armored by love, and with faith from above, he shares his written works. From cringe thereof, the work he's proud of was truly just the worst. I'm not a man of faith. I'm not a man of smarts. I don't know if there's a heaven, but I know there's a hell, for I've been there before. Those pages turned it to 11. Blinded by pity, I ignored his kitty and tried to be witty instead. Far from gritty, I spun a ditty and gave a critique that misled. I've said this before, of at least a couple score, and honesty is what I've since worn. Truth I shall pour, in abundance galore. I have but 3 words to warn. Ross just sucks. I like the burger beard rhyming better. Save me, Zuka. Player writes awkward love story between player characters. Names have been changed. Ross fancied himself a writer, and to his credit, in the most technical sense, he was. He wrote a lot. Man, did he write. Unfortunately, it's the kind of writing that I genuinely believe makes the world a poorer place by having it in it, regardless of anyone actually reading it or not. See, again, we're going kind of hard on the poor guy for what he enjoys. I see what people are talking about. The same could probably be said about the poem that you wrote, OP. Shots fired. Anyways, prior to the love story he inflicted on us, I'd already gotten a pretty good idea of his talents as a writer, being his roommate and also being too polite, at least at the time. I've since been cured of that affliction, to tell him how absolutely terrible his writing actually was. Or still is. I don't know. I thankfully haven't had to read anything of his in a while, as that friendship was mercifully euthanized nearly 10 years ago. Ross is living rent-free in your head, bro. A decade? Alright. Before I actually tell you about the love story, I need to set some expectations for you. If there were any justice in this world, I'd have examples of his, talents, but I don't. Actually, there might be justice in this world, as I don't have examples. In either case, you'll just have to use your imagination a bit in order to appreciate these examples of Ross's writing capabilities. To start, Ross wrote some poetry. I say some in the sense that John Doe from Seven kept some journals. Ross filled book upon book with his poetry. He tried to convince me once that they were different poems. I remain unconvinced still, as the poetry he inflicted upon those poor, innocent pages all followed the exact same writing scheme, rhythm, and subject matter. As the poet once said, I can hold a note forever, but eventually that's just noise. It's the change that we're listening for. Well, baby, Ross held the same note for near on his entire life, as far as I could tell. It tended to go a little something like this. Oh, not more poetry. Kill me.
I walk in the shadows to hear you cry, forever waiting in the dirt to lie. Can't hold on any to my hope more. Shaken by love, it hurts to my core.
Can't hold on any to my hope more. God damn it. I'm ashamed to say that as bad as that is, it's not nearly as bad as Ross's. You really like to stroke your own dick, don't you, OP?
It's like, yeah, my poetry's bad, but this guy, whoa. I don't have any examples, but believe me, this guy's way worse. How could it get worse? All right. In all honesty, it was kind of impressive what he had managed to accomplish. It was like the Room of poetry. He was the Tommy Wiseau of angsty elementary school rhyming. Haha, what a poem, Mark. Imagine you're in grade 3 and you just done a unit in English class about poetry and had been assigned to write some, and that you always wanted to hold hands with that one special person in class, but just never worked up the courage to ask him. And also, you're absolutely convinced that you are the only person in the history of the universe who has ever felt the emotional pain for the yearning of hand-holding. And so, you fill up hundreds of pages in this newfangled art form that you've received a rough description of recently, but everything that you write is the verbal equivalent of when an anime schoolgirl's eyes are shaking when on the verge of tears. That is what Ross wrote for poetry. Tomes of it. An encyclopedia. Are you fucking with me, a Tanica of it? One more example because I really want to hammer this home for you. You're really just embarrassing yourself at this point, OP. See, this is why people turned on you. You went too far. This is what happened in the Artbeard saga too. OP opened up with just like a vitriol dump. And then at the end of the story, we got like some antics from Artbeard, and I'm like, okay, he is kind of a jerk. But this, I've read 4 stories about Ross. He doesn't seem like an actively malicious person. OP just seems like he needs somebody to hate. Anyways, Ross was oblivious to tropes. His exposure to, I guess, life in general was limited. And so anytime he had an idea, it seemed to him that it was the first time that someone had thought of it, for he had no frame of reference to compare it to, which is why, when he told me that he was writing a fantasy novel, I could almost predict verbatim his concept. And when I say a novel, I mean he had about 40 pages of handwritten bullshit that I still have not forgiven his parents for vicariously inflicting upon me. See? Like that. That's too much. Take 2 seconds. Think about the saddest, most tiredest fantasy tropes as a story concept that you can think of before reading ahead, and then compare what you thought to what Ross thought and see how close you were. I trust you'll be pretty spot on. Got it? Okay, fantasy tropes. We got elves, dwarves, humans, and such. They're going to war against a great evil. They need to get rid or gain control of an artifact of power, and maybe some love story threads, and at the end they destroy the artifact and win the war and everybody's happy. I just told you every fantasy story ever. Okay, it went something like this. Thousands of years ago, there was a war. I seriously fucking hate myself for even remembering this crap. And in that time, there were 4 sets of armor forged to help combat the forces of darkness. Artifacts of power. They were imbued with ancient primal powers. One had the power of air, one had the power of earth, one had the, seriously fucking disgusted with myself that I can remember this, of water, and one had the power of fire. But there was a 5th set of armor, imbued with a greater power than all the others. It carried the power of the greatest element. It had the power of love. God. But it was lost until now, when the chosen one arose. But they didn't know that they were the chosen one, because that's not how being the chosen one works. They were just a simple farmhand or whatever who, and on and on and on. Also, I'm not 100% on this, but I think I remember something about vampires in relation to the Huey Lewis armor. Okay, expectations set. You now know just how talented Ross was, yes? Okay, foreplay is over. Now we can get into the actual meat of this RPG horror story. So, my party had just headed north, while en route to the homeland of 2 players, Ross's ninja, and another player, Eric Samurai, because reasons. And they encountered a Viking-like village under attack by ice giants.
And after helping defend the town, with the help of a summoned fire elemental scroll that seriously ended up biting them in the ass due to the poorly chosen command, but that is a smug story for another subreddit, they learned that a dragon tooth in the village contained the soul of an evil dragon that the giants wanted for dastardly and naughty reasons, as giants are wont to do. And the only way to destroy this tooth was to take it to a portal leading to the elemental plane of fire in a far-off cave. And because they're heroes, they accepted the quest. Suckers. Are you seriously just trying to make this game miserable for your players, or is that sarcasm? I mean, they're playing 2nd edition, right? 2nd edition does really have a GM versus the players kind of mentality to it. But anywho, they eventually get to the cave, and they camp at the cave mouth, as they'd recently been roughed up by a Remoraz and wanted to ensure that they faced the challenges of the fire cave at full strength. We had ended the session there with plans to pick up the next session when they awoke. In the ensuing 2 weeks between sessions, Ross got to work. Now, I need to pause here and clear something up. Ross was not interested in men. Ross had stuff going on, believe me. And as much as I shit on him here, there are some things that I just won't share with the internet, as they were genuinely told to me in confidence, and I'm not that much of an asshole. But Ross, indeed, was not interested in men. Ross also viewed Eric, specifically, as nothing more than a good friend. Which is why, to this day, I am still dumbfounded as to why he wrote an epic forbidden love story between his ninja girl and Eric's samurai dude. It wasn't pornographic. Well, not in the sense of parts going into other parts. It was emotionally pornographic in the way that Twilight is emotionally pornographic. Gonna get demonetized. It was the kind of tripe that a 10-year-old girl would get weak in the knees over when they had no concept of what romance actually was. Oh god, just writing about it leaves a sour taste on the sides of my tongue. I can't begin to impress upon you, whoever you are, dear random internet person who is reading this, how freaking uncomfortable this story was. The very thought of an over 30-year-old man writing a love story between his character and his friend's character feels weird. To me, granted, maybe I'm the minority. I don't suspect that I am, but I could be. Okay, well, it's pretty obvious that the little girl isn't a self-insert, right? You don't even know how to play pretend, OP. To give you a brief overview of what the 15 pages he proudly thrust towards me for eagerly awaited feedback contained, Ninja and Samurai are on watch in the middle of a cold winter's night. Ninja starts crying. A concerned Samurai asks, "What's wrong?" Ninja confesses in shame about her fear of returning to her homeland, unsure if she's reclaimed her honor since leaving. Samurai, oh so tenderly, opens up his fur cloak to bring her into his arms and hold her close. Finding comfort in his arms, she nuzzles against his chest, feeling safe, feeling his love. She slowly gathers her composure, reassured in her own strength by his strength, and when Samurai says he's never met anyone as strong as her, she realizes that she loves him, and they gaze into each other's eyes, or something, and they can feel the love that cannot be, for they each have obligations to the world that forbade them from the comfort of expressing their mutual love. But they have tonight, at least, and so they sit there by the fire, comforting each other for as long as they can. Is it a little cringy? Yeah, sure, why not? It's nowhere near as bad as it could have been. You're making too big a deal out of this, OP. I am not a particularly wise man. I don't know the answers to the big questions. I don't know if there's a God. I don't know if there's a heaven, but I know for a fact there is a hell, because I saw it in those pages. I don't want what I'm about to type to be hyperbole. BRB in a couple minutes. There. I just went and brushed my teeth to get the taste of what the actual fuck out of my mouth. And now I can continue. And it wasn't just that it was terribly awkward. It was just so poorly written. The prose was simple. There was no subtlety or subtext. It was all so terribly, obviously awful in every complete sense of the word. Yeah, Ross don't seem like the most creative guy, but at least he enjoys what he's doing. Also, I'm not taking tips on prose from OP. I've seen your poetry, OP. You're not in a position to give advice on prose. So I told him it had some interesting parts, because I was too much of a wimp to tell a friend that their writing sucked and made me feel weird. Weird how? Like weird in your pants? When I asked him why he had wrote it, because I was positive no one had asked him to, he just said he had a neat idea about the conversation his ninja would have had with the samurai while camping. And they did have a conversation, to be fair, but it sure as hell wasn't that. I don't know, man. It's hard to tell without reading the story, but Ross seems like a simple dude. I think OP's reading far too deep into it. And because I didn't take Ross's delusions and drown them in a tub like a sack full of unwanted kittens, he promptly showed the story to Eric. I've known Eric for almost 15 years. Not only is he one of my best friends, but he's one of the most forgiving people that I know. I can say with the full confidence of someone who has tested him beyond the reasonable expectations of friendship, because he forgave me for letting him read that story. Hyperbole indeed. Eric, to his credit, was pretty kind, in a way. He definitely encouraged Ross to take another pass at it, and he also warned everyone else about the story well in advance, and he didn't punch me in the goddamn mouth the next time he saw me. Like I said, he's a solid dude. I don't know if Ross ever edited his story before the next session. I do know that he tried to offer it to the other players, and to their credit, they all declined, even without Eric's warnings. I'm pretty sure the two of us psychically screamed loud enough to every person at the table to get the message across, which is for the best, because at least one person at the table tolerated Ross only insofar as that he didn't actively try to attack Ross. But when presented with opportunities, our cleric Rod didn't sugarcoat his opinions. And if Ross had broken down in tears from some honest feedback, which I trust he would have, I sure as hell wasn't going to hold him to my chest throughout the night in order to comfort him. That ending's pretty good though. As much as I rip on OP. This is a good wrap up. And this still wasn't the worst of Ross, of course. He continued to find new and amazing ways to exasperate everyone. TLDR. I don't know, man. I still feel all mixed up. Like, OP hasn't come out as completely an asshole. Like, yes, he's hyperbolic and really seems to have some deeply unfounded hatred for Ross. And Ross is just kind of clueless, doing his own thing. Not giving a shit, doing what he enjoys. Doing it poorly, granted, but at least he's enjoying himself, which I think is the most important thing of all. So if I had to choose between the two, yeah, I guess I do side with Ross. That was a pretty tame story, all things considered. I've seen much worse, and those much worse things were described with a lot less anger, a lot less vitriol, I should say. It's not necessarily anger, it's just dripping with vitriol. And 10 years ago, that's the most amazing part. Dude has been with you for a decade. Do you think that Ross remembers the OP? Or is the OP just sitting there seething about somebody who, like, has forgotten his existence completely? That would be the most poetic justice in my mind. Ross just sucks.
Fun? Where was the fun? Tell me specifically, which part was the fun part?
And as per usual, we start out the Ballad of Ross with OP's little song here. Still doesn't hold a candle to Zuka, but hey, at least he tried, I guess. Crafting a story left us all sorry. I think OP's Canadian. Writing was not his forte. Perhaps a tactician is he. The lead I bury, but do not worry, your confidence I won't betray. In a moment, the obvious you will see. I gotta say, writing doesn't seem to be your forte either, OP. In a homebrew he took part in, plans and plots made a linchpin. They encountered a threat devoured by undeath of a ruin they were soon in. Oh god, that hurts. But understand me when I say he made a blunder, he still makes me wonder how he made that decision. Linchpin soon in, decision. Yeah, I guess. Climbing walls to sneak behind by way of directly before, I made him roll each time. I saw his soul die, and so he began to whine, and despite success, he managed to fail, despite how I implored. Another time, another world, another combat situation, another plan, another roll, another soul ablation. Behold, a necromancer of sorts who casts a flame wall. Behold, Ross has the answer, and like a panther, decides to climb a wall. Despite our pleas to freeze, if he'd please, and trust these words of wisdom, Ross disagrees with ease. He has expertise, and continues the party's schism. I've said it before, and I'll say it some more. The one point I want to underscore. If there's one truth I sleuthed from my youth, it is this. Ross just sucks. So he likes climbing walls. Go ahead, sue the guy. Player won't stop climbing walls in the middle of combat. Gets angry when he keeps, missing combat. Names have changed. Oh, Ross, I've talked of you so much lately. Here, for instance. That's the story from the last video. One thing I will admit to being absolutely impressed with by Ross was his ability to stick to his convictions. When he sets his mind on something, he will fasten a kung fu grip so tight onto it that no amount of reality will buck him off. He will ride his desires and delusions into even hell itself. I know this to be true, as he has dragged me into it more than once. There's something to be said for stubbornness. The first D&D character Ross ever played was a teeny tiny Japanese ninja girl. The second D&D character Ross ever played was a teeny tiny Japanese monk cat girl. It's getting worse. We never did manage to remember the name that he had given to either character, as they were just a mouthful of Japanese names that my brain mercifully refused to allow entry into my memory. It was just as well, because even though one was played in a 2nd edition Greyhawk-inspired homebrew, and the other was played in a 3rd edition Eberron-inspired homebrew, they were basically completely indiscernible from each other in any way, having basically the exact same personality as each other, which is, to clarify, no personality at all. Hey, come on, they got personality, they're Japanese and girls. That is all the makings of a neckbeard. Just see all Japanese women as the same cardboard cutout. Great job! I would say that they just had his personality, but that would be too generous a characterization of the sock puppets that he ostensibly roleplayed. No, Ross's personality began and ended with Japanese fetishization, Star Wars, The Matrix, and Gem and the Holograms. But at least that's something. Gem and the Hologram seems kinda out of sorts. The wiser among you, i.e. anyone that no longer eats paste, can differentiate between an interest and a personality, and may be thinking to themselves at this point, hey, those aren't personalities, those are just things someone likes. That'd be like saying someone's personality was pizza, or the smell of freshly folded laundry. And to you, I would say, you're absolutely correct, but shush, I'm trying to tell a story here. Jeez! Being right isn't the point. Reality seldom found cause to impose itself into Ross's thought process. Ross found a way to make Gem and the Holograms a personality. It was outrageous. Truly, truly outrageous, but despite this metaphysical accomplishment, most of those personality features couldn't easily transition to D&D, so his character's personalities were basically just hollowed out versions of himself, like someone had scooped out Ross's insides and made a frowny-faced jack-o'-lantern filled with melted cheese and sour cream instead of a birthday candle. What the hell are you talking about, OP? I mean, I kind of agree to a point, you know, like I always say, like things but don't become a fan. Don't let it consume your entire being. And maybe that's the point that OP's trying to make, but instead he brings in this metaphor with like a jack-o'-lantern and a birthday candle. Like, I'm not following, honestly. But we called Ross's character Kitty. Despite this, Ross fancied each character in turn quite the tactician. And while I wouldn't call him Sun Tzu, crawling kitty style has become a strategy synonymous with Ross's philosophy of combat and will survive through the ages unmarked as a testament to his incredible tactical genius. I had blown up a large island. It wasn't nearby, but parts of the island nation rained down along the continent, sowing destruction and discord as part of a plot that we never got around to resolving, and as a way of doing some interesting encounters, a treant with a magically tainted anvil embedded in its trunk, as an example. Such encounters were strewn across the land, in random and interesting places. Submitted for the approval of the RPG Horror Stories subreddit, I call this story The Tale of the Dumbest Tactical Decision I've Been Privy. Bro, that's a wordy title. They're gonna kick you right out of Midnight Society. So imagine a church. Not a big one, like a small country village church. Now explode that sucker. Imagine the roof blew off of it, like it was in a Donald Duck cartoon, and that the roof flew thousands of kilometers through the air before landing with a kerplunk in the middle of nowhere, partially embedded into the dirt at an angle. So the front part of the roof is jutting out, and then slowly sinks into the earth towards the back. It's about 15 feet high from roof to ceiling at the front of the hole, and about 2 feet high from ceiling to dirt at the back. Kinda like an apocalyptic lean-to. And imagine the denizens of said church are haunting their newly exploded dirt hut as ghasts. A nice little encounter. Should be relatively straightforward. Well, my intrepid heroes, being the upstanding stalwart figures of a burgeoning legend, aren't gonna pass by a bunch of pissed off undead assholes and risk them spreading evil and whatnot in their stead. Understandably, they decide to go stab them. Roll initiative. Ross goes somewhere in the middle. First few people walk up to the church and start with the fisticuffs. And then along comes Ross. Never one to pass up an opportunity to ninja, or maul ninja, more accurately. I just wish to God there was an occasion where he would decide to pass on the whole ninja thing. He seized his kung fu grip into a titillating idea, dragging us all into our own collective hell for the next few rounds of combat. With the careful measure of a grandmaster chess player, he announces his surefire strategy that will lead him to bingo. I don't play chess, but you shout out bingo and you get crowned, right? Oh, B, stop. Stop with the humor. It's not your forte, and that's all right, you know? That's probably what makes people dislike this OP so much. He's trying really hard to look awesome and be funny, and neither of those things are working.
I'm gonna climb the wall,
Ross says in triumph. Ross, buddy, why? From a standing hop, you can brush your fingers against the roof. Why on earth would you need to climb the walls just as combat is getting started?
I'm gonna climb along the ceiling and drop down behind them so I can surprise them from the back.
Uh-huh. Okay. This was my fault, I figured. I hadn't explained the setup correctly, perhaps. Ross isn't that dumb, surely. I just maybe did a bad job of painting a mental picture. Let's back up a second and go over this one more time so that you can decide what you want to do. Ross listens to me. Nods. I see that he understands the words I am saying and the order in which I have put them, which makes my intentions clear. Great. So, Ross, what are you going to do?
I'm gonna climb along the ceiling and drop down behind them so I can surprise them from the back.
Oh, whatever, bro. Just let him do what he wants, for God's sake. Power tripping GM. Hey, that's not how you're supposed to approach this encounter. Bro, how about I do whatever the fuck I want? Okay, so I'm looking around the table and seeing a lot of stupid glances being levied against an oblivious Ross. It's not just me, so that's good. I was worried I was having a stroke for a second. But you know what? I get it. It's a weird setup, and even describing something sometimes can't quite convey an idea accurately. So I literally draw him a goddamn picture. There. That. This is what you have to work with. That little stick figure there with the stinky lines over him, that's where the bad guys are. See this little stick figure with the sword? That's where you guys are. See how much headspace there isn't the more you go in? Good. You understand now, yes? All right. Now that we're all on the same page, Ross, please tell me what you're doing and don't disappoint me. God, what a douche, bro. It reminds me so much of this like knot tying rogue that I had, who was like really focused on archery. So his main goal during combat would be to climb up somewhere and pelt enemies with arrows. And he ended up falling to his death at one point, but I'm so glad the dungeon master didn't be like, oh, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Well, it's just a game, okay? I understand you've set up this encounter in a certain way, but playing D&D is a lot like herding cats, okay? It's never going to go the way that you expect it to go. And that's part of the beauty of it. You need to embrace that, OP, instead of making somebody feel like an asshole for whatever move they want to make. At this point, I feel like I've correctly set your expectations in who Ross is and who Ross isn't. I don't feel like I need to draw you a goddamn picture. I'm just gonna leave a nice long blank space, absent of words, so that you can say it yourself. Okay, so we're all frustrated with him together. And then OP's talking down to like the people that are reading the story. Ugh, he's just insufferable. Despite what a catty bitch I had been to Ross in absentia here on the subreddit, I tried not to be an asshole in real life. Despite my feelings, I didn't mean to be condescending, but I was when I asked him, how the fuck do you think you'll sneak past them? The roof is 4 inches above their heads back there. In hindsight, I think that was what caused him to tighten his grip. His stupid grip on that stupid idea. Like, no one's actually that idiotic, right? Like, regardless of how well I worded the description or drew the picture, no one could actually think that they could sneak over a group of ghasts in the middle of combat with only a 4-inch gap to squeeze through, right? It has to be that I offended him and he was gonna show me what for, like how a little kid will knock a birthday cake on the ground, because if he doesn't get the corner piece, then no one gets any piece. Oh, God, you're projecting so hard, OP. Holding up the whole game like, play this encounter the way I want you to play it. Let him fucking roll sneak. Let him fail the roll. Like, what's wrong with that? You warned him. Let him do it. Okay, you didn't pass. Now you're in combat. Now we can move forward. Oh, God. The frustration is palpable. A DM can't actually force someone not to be an idiot, so I accepted it. Fucking finally. His teammates didn't, though. Dope. It's time to find a new group. They took up the futile call to reason. Whatever. One by one, the table just kind of learned to accept that this was gonna be a thing. So, here's the thing about ghasts. They fucking stink. You gotta make a save versus poison at -2, or start uncontrollably retching. Ross couldn't have been more aware of this, as he had seen some of their comrades moments before fail their throws. Undaunted, Ross still goes to climb that damn wall, and the predictable happens. Well, now he's got to make his climbing checks at a penalty, because retching and gagging isn't exactly conducive to parkour. But if you think that a little penalty would prompt Ross to reconsider his decisions, maybe I do need to draw you a picture after all. Yes, indeed, OP. How dare he play the game the way he wants to play it. I get what people are saying now. This is the worst story so far. I'm frustrated with the OP far more than with Ross. So, Ross starts trying and failing to climb the wall to reach the ceiling. In the meantime, combat abounds. Eventually, he gets up there and then starts climbing upside down. And because I'm sick of arguing with him, I accept his reasoning that surely his ninja would have trained at climbing a freaking angled and arched ceiling upside down as part of her training, so I don't give him any further penalties. He's accomplished his goal, but it's about the time that he's hanging onto the ceiling, crawling along like an inverted turtle at their shoulder height, when he gets huffy as I tell him that one of the ghasts attacks. The gall of me. I mean, don't I know that he's climbing along the ceilings sneakily? He had asked if he could roll stealth, granted, and I let him roll, but roll or no, I explained that all the stealth in the world could not hide someone being at eye level with the person 6 feet in front of them. So in a huff, he finally decides to just hop down and attack. Oh, another thing about ghasts. They paralyze when they attack. And no, being upside down with all your limbs firmly planting you in place directly in front of the thing that wants to kill you does not make you harder to hit. Shocking, I know. So Ross gets paralyzed. Not that it mattered much, as combat ended the round after he dropped into the dirt like a paralyzed stone. At least he was involved in that combat. Yay? A couple of years later, my friend Rod, who had been playing a cleric in that very topsy-turvy session, was DMing a game. I was playing one of my favorite player characters in my life of gaming. That's a story for another subreddit. Ross is playing as Cat Monk now, and the party just arrived to the brilliant conclusion that an old man wearing a black coat who hired us to retrieve a book must in fact be an evil necromancer. The evidence was pretty conclusive. I mean, he was wearing a black cloak. D&D party members are always funny, man. You really get that mob mentality going. Well, also the paladin had detected something evil from me, and I was holding the book, so it had to be the book, I assured everyone. Because the NPC is smarter than us, he casts a wall of fire between us and him in the tavern that we were meeting him in, bisecting the main room in two. As we're rolling initiative, we're all trying to figure out how to get to the necromancer, because that's totally what he was, I swear. Some are considering rounding the outside of the building. The tougher of our numbers were considering leaping through the flame. Ross wins initiative.
I'm gonna climb on the ceiling and crawl over the flames.
In that moment, everyone at the table that wasn't Ross collectively became one. For a moment, our minds found solace in the face of stupidity, and we melded into a hive mind. And it was as one that 5 open palms smacked 5 respective foreheads in complete disbelief. Not this shit again. Rod quickly assures Ross that the flames reach the ceiling, and still, Ross intends to climb the wall. Someone points out that he can climb the stairs to the balcony that overlooks the room to reach the ceiling instead of just climbing up the wall, and still, Ross will climb. Of all the reason and pleading and incredulity we levied at Ross, unchanged was his conviction. But Ross's cat girl was much lower level than his ninja girl, and so when he went to climb the wall, unlike those years before, he failed, and kept right on failing. But failure wasn't an option for him. Oh no! And so he kept trying. Something like 4 straight melee rounds. Arrows and spells are being fired through the wall in either direction, and in the periphery of the firefight, it was like those cartoons, where a cat climbs up a wall or a cliff, and then slides back down with the lines of the claw marks comically left in its wake, except it was much more depressing than that. But at least he's staying safe and out of combat. To our credit, one of our number eventually realized that the wall of fire was illusionary, and that the necromancer had escaped, unscathed and undetected, right around the same time that Ross finally reached the ceiling and discovered for himself that he could not, in fact, climb over the flames. The illusionary flames? Why can't he climb over the flames? I don't understand. I'm not going to go over every instance of Ross's failure to climb walls during combat. He never did learn his lesson, but it also didn't happen every single combat. But I will say that it happened enough. That's not the point of this story. They say insanity is repeating the same action and expecting a different result, much like OP even inviting Ross to these games. Well, we kept letting Ross play with us, and kept expecting him to not act like a total knob. No, the point of this story isn't to list every little quibble. The point is to express that some horror stories are your own goddamn fault. Hey, there's a bit of that self-reflection, a little bit of realization peeking through. And yet, despite all that I've already shared, we still expected a different result. And to be fair, Ross had never TPK'd an entire campaign before, but we'll get to those stories in a bit. Edit. TLDR. Stupid keeps stupiding up the side of stupid walls. The walls aren't stupid though, only the ones stupiding up the side of them are stupid, and I still haven't gotten over it. Many years later, just keep on keeping on. Hold on to that one guy because you're such a better player than him. You know how he should approach every encounter before he even gets there, man. Like, who cares? We're here to play a game. We're here to have a little bit of fun. Fudge a roll or two. Let him climb the fucking wall. Like, is it really that big of a deal? You're playing imagination game with math rocks and you want to sit here and be a purist? Be like, oh, well, I'm the best math rock imagination player there is. I designed this campaign, so I know how things are supposed to go. No, you obviously do not. Do players do stupid things in campaigns sometimes? Hell yeah, all the time. But they don't generally get singled out for a Reddit story years and years later. It's just exceedingly petty of OP. Is Ross dumb? Yeah, but he's there to have a good time. Let him do some dumb stuff. Like, what's wrong with that? When I sit down and play D&D with the Discord peeps, you better believe that I'm going to do some dumb stuff. And I'm still going to upload it so it can be chronicled for perpetuity just how dumb I actually am. But even if Ross or I am not the best player at Dungeons and Dragons, at least we're there to have fun, not taking it super serious like OP. Ugh, that's a tough one to get to. But I've not had enough punishment quite yet. So we will jump back into this poem and see what comes next. Another diversion, and still without aversion to that lumpy Neo, I invite along Rod to help us. Despite the third wheel, an adventure through the planes of existence is just what we need. But in the distance, Ross is consistent and remains a terrible weed. Adrift in the astral, a challenge they tackled with glee, fending off Gith and fending off demons, a silver thread they see. Taking Frisbees to the face has taught Ross not a thing. In frustration, he explains his narration to my incredulation. In him, my faith I realize misplaced as he cuts the string. In deflation, the game meets cessation, and I consider a new vocation. In a world of Ross, there can be but one answer to his equation. There be no suasion or evasion to one unalienable truth. Ross just sucks. It's actually one of the better sections of the poem, if I'm being completely honest. Still not good, but better. Frustrated player strands everyone in the astral plane, effectively TPKing the party and ending the entire campaign. Names have been changed. For anyone interested, the previous entry in the Ross ballad can be found here, which I just read. This is the big one. Of all the BS that Ross put me through, and the list is substantial in both D&D and real life, this is honestly the one that hurt the most. This was the moment he broke me as a DM and made me just throw my arms up in the air like I just didn't care, because honestly, I didn't anymore. You can't win against Ross. He's a compact ball of oblivious misery that just cannot be defeated. To oppose him is folly. All you can do is avoid him until he decides on his own to leave the goddamn country. So, who here has heard of the Tales of the Outer Planes? If you want to take a minute to either act smugly because you have heard of it, or to go quickly look it up so you can act smugly because you're pretending that you've heard of it, you go ahead. And you go ahead and keep talking down your nose at people, OP. It's really becoming. That's how you ingratiate yourself to Reddit readers. Jesus. The House of TSR was founded on sprawling and insurmountable epic adventures once upon a time. A trend I'm glad to say Wizards has returned to with the 5th edition. There was a dry spell there for a while, but we persevered. What once was great remains so. Tales of the Outer Planes is a boss of a module that's a hell of a lot of crazy fun. Or it would have been, save for Ross's best efforts. Maybe effort is the wrong word to use there, because he sure made it seem effortless. You put whatever connotation you want onto those words, and it's probably right. Ross was like that illusion where you see the bunny one way or an old lady the other way. Is it a bunny or a lady? Was he an asshole or an idiot? Yes. The answer is yes to both. Yes. Anyone too enraptured with my stream of consciousness rantings, thinly disguised as a story to go look up Tales of the Outer Planes, here's a quick rundown of what it is. You know them there outer planes? You gonna go up there. Which ones, you ask? Yes. Again, the answer is yes. Over the course of 12 or so levels, you'll end up taking a selfie in an elemental plane of water, rent an Airbnb in one of the 7 heavens, get a few photos for the gram on Olympus, and take a walking tour through a couple layers of the abyss. Hashtag living your best play character life. Yeah, that's what it's about. It's not about having the experiences, it's about telling other people that I did. All of this is facilitated by the World Serpent Inn, an interdimensional tavern with rooms that lead to all sorts of fun places. The ethereal plane, for example. Now, this was a 1st edition module, back in the not to be fucked with lightly days, which honestly worked for me. With a bit of tinkering, it would be a challenging adventure for my 2nd edition players. I'm a DM who isn't afraid to throw my players in the shit, unless they're approaching an encounter the wrong way, right? To make it even more interesting, I decided to incorporate an article from Dragon Magazine 351 titled Alternate Primes. It was a series of adventures that could be tied together through the use of the World Serpent Inn. These adventures would take a party brave enough for the challenge through the different campaign settings of D&D, such as Al-Qadim, Dark Sun, and Ravenloft. I decided I would follow Tales of the Outer Planes as the main adventure, and the AP adventures as a way to mix it up on a random occasion, as well as a means by which some extra experience can be earned, so as to level match Outer Planes if they ever fell behind in the module. Also because the Ravenloft adventures feature my favorite D&D character of all time, Lord Soth. I'm all about that Soth. But hey, what do I know? I'm just sipping Soth. Soth features on the cover of that issue, and I have that exact image tattooed on my arm because I likes me the Soths. A lots of Soths. I wasn't going to pass up an opportunity to put my players into Sithicus, is what I'm getting at. By the way, did you know that a group of Soths is known as a boardroom? A boardroom of Soths. There's something that you know now. You're welcome. Oh, thank you so much for this pearl of wisdom, OP. I'm sure I'll use it to great effect. The story is so aggravating to me after all these years for a number of reasons. Not only was the adventure epic and awesome, not only was I going to get to play around with my favorite dreadlord, kinda, not only was this all meant to be a light and breezy distraction from the main campaign, but it also included what I still consider as the best 1-2 combination of player characters that I have ever had the privilege of DMing. Marcus Vaughn, the cleric, played by my friend Eric the cleric, and Alexander Mann, the action man, The fighter, played by another friend, Rod. They both worked great together. Marcus was the loyal friend, quiet and wise. Alex was about as sharp as a brick, but he was a jovial and flippant comrade in arms. It was honestly a good pairing. The three of us have made up a pretty consistent core playing group for most of my DMing career, but those two characters just worked beautifully together. There was also a mage, played by Ross's friend Max, whom he RP'd as a young but eager to learn rookie. And then there was Ross. He played a paladin named Zelda. Oh no. She had about as much personality as some old Venetian blinds. Sure, she could cast a shadow, but didn't really accomplish much beyond that. And we always considered replacing her with something fancier, but just never quite got around to that project. Oh my god, I'm actually impressed with how accurate that analogy ended up being. Something tells me you are often impressed with yourself, OP. Now, every DM, like every parent, does have favorites. Sure, you love all your children equally or whatever, but if there's a Sophie's Choice situation, you already know which one is going down. Every parent and every DM has had that conversation with themselves at one time or another. You don't have kids, do you, OP? Ross. Ross was always the answer. Ross is always the answer. I plus fuck equals Ross. Solve for I. Is a trick question. I is an imaginary number that represents literally any fucking thing because the answer is always Ross. That doesn't mean I conveyed that. I worked very hard, in fact, to avoid any semblance of my burgeoning hostility to the sound of his stupid, stupid voice. My normal playstyle as a DM was to just throw a frisbee out there and trust that someone will run to it and throw it back. I don't favor anyone. Fun is out there to be had, and all you have to do is get after it. Unless you're trying to climb all walls. Don't try to fucking climb all walls in my campaigns. Granted, some people are better than others at catching a frisbee. So when you see that short, chubby old man quietly moping off to the side, you eventually just start sailing a few in that direction. You try not to make it obvious, but you're setting him up for an easy one. Well, Ross didn't take to subtleties. Playing frisbee with Ross is like how Bart plays frisbee with Santa's little helper. You just hit him in the fucking face full force with it, and his dumb expression would never change. So despite meeting the gods and planar beings in the ethereal, water, air, fire, and earth planes, as well as day trips to Oerth and, I think this is like 10 years ago, Sigil, Ross just ain't having fun. He could hang a lampshade on Zelda by doing something generically lawful good every now and then, or casting a healing spell or whatever, but she was never going to grow up and become a real girl. And because Ross wasn't deluded by words like ninja or cat girl with this character, he saw through his shortcomings for once in his life and realized,
This was BS.
and I gotta hand it to him. He was right to not be having fun. It was BS. Every session he just sat there and got frisbees thrown in his fucking face all day. I mean, I'd get pissed too after a while. You're remembering this 10 years later, OP. You are mad beyond mad. All these posts about a 10-year-old experience, bro, I can't help you. So the group is a little over halfway through the module, and if you're worried about spoilers from a 32-year-old D&D module, well, I can't help you out there, bud. Your priorities don't match reality. This is a you problem. Yeah, so the best solution is definitely to just be a dick about it. So peace solution to everything. So they're halfway through Outer Planes. Alex Mann had just gotten married to the Drider who frequents the tavern. Well, it would be more accurate to say he kind of sold himself into perpetual indentured servitude for the Drider, but he was happy, so whatever, I guess. The cleric and the mage have gotten a nice little big brother, little brother thing that's going on. And Ross's paladin was just some pissy blinds, all tangled up in its own cord. When all of a sudden, they're approached by a hooded figure in desperate need of some champions. You see, this person's master, an arcane sage, has had their soul trapped within the astral plane while searching for a legendary magical item known as the Book of the Planes. They agree to go and rescue the sage, which is great because they're soon to find out that they're about to prevent a Githyanki invasion of the prime material plane by doing so. Or they would have, except that they didn't count on one thing that can never be defeated: Ross's frustration and idiocy, a deadly combination from which there is no hope of salvation. So we're cruising along when, behold, they found the trail. The silver thread tethering the mage's body to the mage's soul has been found. All they need to do is find the mage's soul, stumble across the Githyanki, foil their invasion, gather the Book of the Planes, and following the thread, just row back to Spain like there's no mañana. Simple, right? Well, it's D&D, so there's always encounters. Don't act shocked, you know there's always encounters. And Ross has basically had enough of this. Being attacked by some demons, everybody rolls initiative. Eric does this, Max does that, Rod does something else. Ross, on his turn, thinks for a moment. You see in his mind that he has reasoned that the demons are after the silver thread, the one that's tethering the mage's soul to her freaking body. And he reasons still further that if the demons want it, then it is the problem.
I cut the thread.
Oh, that mage is dead. Now, no DM ever wants to actively thwart a player's decision, unless you're climbing on walls. If you climbing on walls in my campaign, bro. If a player wants to be stupid, they can live with the consequences. The Dungeon Master has the benefit of knowing what the consequences will be, and is often more than happy to inflict them for their own perverse amusement. I speak from experience. You want to draw how many cards from the deck of many things? You got it, Sparky. Congratulations, the god of the undead fucking hates you now, so you might want to keep an eye out for that. But now and again, a decision will be considered so dumb that it threatens the very fabric of the game. And in those times, we DMs will ask the question that carries more weight than anything else in all of Dungeons & Dragons could possibly carry. It's those three little words that will give even the most cavalier of adventurer pause to consider their life choices. Are you sure? It's the tone that sells it. The three other players, even Ross's shut-in of a friend that has no D&D experience prior to this game, takes note. Their heads all swivel in unison to look back at Ross, who's suddenly very alone in the room. And to his credit, he pauses, considers his actions, he weighs his options, and re-examines the playing field.
Well, I can't think of anything else to do, so yeah, I cut the thread.
Too much credit, apparently. His teammates start assailing him with suggestions and cries of fear. That silver thread, the one that tethers the mage's soul to her body, might kill her if cut. And Ross's paladin is surely wise enough to maybe figure at least that out. And a paladin wouldn't knowingly kill someone if it's even a possibility. Surely. Surely? I would knowingly kill someone. And don't call me Shirley. But Ross is basically done. If he considered stabbing the demons that were attacking him instead of murdering a helpless NPC, his frustration clouded his reasoning. And don't call him Shirley. Hey, that's my line! You back off! You write your own jokes. I steal the jokes from popular media. With a grumpy expression, and I swear to God, an eye misty from frustration at his own impotence as a player, he just nods.
Yeah, I don't know what else to do. I cut the thread.
For a second there, I was transported back to a moment years prior. A moment where I, Eric, and Ross sat together around that very same table, and I had asked him what he wanted to do on his turn.
I fired my proton pack at the cab.
We did read that story. Then, as now, Ross had been given the opportunity to to reconsider his decision at the behest of his game master and his teammates alike. And then, as now, Ross had weighed and measured everything and doubled down on doing the wrong thing. And it all became so clear to me in that moment. I'd adopted Ross into my life when he was in a terrible situation. I had let him live with me rent-free for over a month, moved his shit from a literal dungeon into my place, and then later into the apartment that I had found for him. And then I became roommates with him for 5 years straight, all out of pity, because he reminded me of the social idiot that I had once been when I was 15 years old and hadn't gotten my shit together and did some growing up. Just a sad, inept sack of bewilderment. Except he was 5 years older than me. I had been convinced that all he needed was someone in his corner, someone to give him the benefit of the doubt, and over time he'd get better. But there he was, years later, unchanged, doing the same exact thing for the same exact reasons, because he was a stupid asshole from womb to the tomb. You call this being in his corner? Bro, I'd hate to have you in my corner, honestly. There were frustrations in our friendship, both big and small, but I honestly think that was the moment I realized I was done with him. Even though it was a genuinely innocuous thing, just a game of D&D, I finally accepted that Ross was going to continue festering just as he was. I think it's because it was such an unimportant thing that I finally got that perspective. Like the more important stuff had been prepared for. This was small enough to slip through my defenses. He wasn't gonna change. He wasn't gonna get better, so I closed my book. Alright, well, you do that. You're no longer a paladin as you just murdered someone. You'll have to atone for that before you can get your powers back. And I honestly don't know how to proceed. Because now you're all lost in the astral plane, and you can't stop a world-ending event. I need a few weeks to think about this. Turns out it took more than a few weeks to figure it out. About 2 years ago, we were playing Out of the Abyss when they made it to Graven Hollow. I Easter egged Marcus searching for tomes on the astral plane, so about 10 years for any movement on a resolution. Marcus still hadn't forgiven Zelda, so whatever had happened in the intervening years must have been bad. Eric and Rod were stoked when they recognized Marcus out of character and regaled the other players with tales of the Planeswalker campaign that Ross had derailed. Max spewing Pepsi out of his nose when being welcomed to the club, Marcus Vaughn's incredible wired clothes hanging apparatus, Alex's unbelievable cooking skills, the weird but good, but weird experience that is best left undescribed, and Ross. That time that Ross killed an entire fucking campaign. So, yeah. But this was just the side campaign. I still had my main campaign, and if you think this is the only time that Ross has ever single-handedly caused me to end an entire campaign by being stupid, well, I haven't done a very good job of explaining just who it is we are actually dealing with here. But I got you covered. I still got one more tale for you. TLDR. Paladin murders NPC because the player isn't having fun, ends campaign by helplessly stranding the entire party in the astral plane. Pull the string, and this whole thing's coming down. That's beautiful. Honestly, I don't think I've ever heard of a player derailing an entire campaign so easily. I gotta give props to OP for letting it happen, you know, not forcing Ross's hand in any way. And I don't know, I kind of see where he's coming from. If demons are immune to physical damage and second edition, like paladin spells, I don't think they really get any damaging spells. So what are you gonna do? Just sit around with your dick in your hand? I scratched my balls. That's my action for this turn. I don't know, he wanted to do something, so he did the only thing that he could do and murdered an NPC. Everything's normal here. But at least you were able to kind of bring it back around, even though the person that was trapped in the astral plane for so long was probably irreparably damaged. They come out just, completely crazy. But that's the fun part about the astral planes, isn't it? Everybody's in it just for fun and games. But it's real. You could get lost for a long, long time. I don't have any experience with it in D&D, but when I was playing a multi-user dungeon called Ardwolf, I'd get in my little amulet of the planes, enter one of those pools, and just wander forever. So I do know that the planes are not to be taken lightly. Overall, I do gotta say that I disliked Ross more in this one, mostly because he ruined the fun for the entire table. And OP gets a point because he actually let it happen. He's not power gaming and being like, oh, no, you don't. You can't do that. He's just like, okay, if that's really what you want to do. So the score is tied now. We've got one story where I dislike OP more and one story where I dislike Ross more. The only thing to do now is execute a tiebreaker. So let's get into the last story of the Ross saga, and we'll see how it goes. Oh, but first the crappy poem. At last, I have no one to blame for the pain I endured. Ignorance I can't feign, his talents were plain. My lessons were learned, I assure, from challenges mundane as well as arcane. I have finally matured. He is my bane, to tolerate I deign. Of pity, I have been cured. One final upheaval, the river is evil. I'm no longer deceitful, and I can admit this as gleeful. Ross just sucks. That time, a couple of player characters derailed a campaign, or how I learned to stop worrying and end a complete campaign setting. Names have been changed. Alright, Ross, again. This is it. This is the last one. Speaking of last one, here was the last one before the last one that we just read. I don't even really know where to start with this one. I guess I should be upfront about the amount of Ross in this story. Almost all of the stories I've told about that chibi chipmunk of a man have involved the campaign that I'm about to talk about. As a result, most of the tasty bits have come and gone. This is more a general story of how an okay-ish DM let a campaign get shit all over until it was just a big diarrhea Sunday. But you better believe that poop-covered cherry on top was Ross. This is the story of how a few terrible and destructive decisions, one simple player mistake, and Ross being, well, about as smart as I hope you'd come to expect, resulted in me completely giving up on my first homebrew campaign setting and closed the second chapter of my D&Ding career. I sat up here on my high horse long enough, clucking my tongue and looking down my nose in judgmental distaste at the people who consider me friends for long enough. Something about getting off my high horse. These fucking analogies are killing me, man. You're not the only one, my dude. I think I'm dying. We've done a lot of sagas on this channel, and this has been the one that I enjoyed the least, I'm sad to say. I don't plan what I'm gonna write out. I just start typing, and eventually something kind of funny comes out, I hope. It's not funny. The point is, I'm not gonna sit here for 10 minutes thinking for the right turn of phrase just to take a shot at myself. Fair is fair, and my time has come, and I ain't putting any pepper on it. I was not the best DM. Most of us were in our 20s. I was reliable. I really think that was enough to delude those fools into thinking that I was better than I was. My campaign had all the tropes of terrible world building, hodgepodge of cultures and geography that made no sense. Check. Lifting characters from comics and ideas from fantasy in their entirety and just plopping them down into my setting. Check. A super evil continent of evil that is evil because, just because. Check. And other stuff. I did that thing where you over-prepare way too much bullshit that your players generally don't give a fuck about, and then I took them on a whirlwind tour of everything that I had created. only to be surprised when they couldn't keep any of the details straight. It wasn't perfect, is the point. It was fun, but a lot of the heavy lifting was done by my players, and I just kinda took credit for it. Just like them political party that you don't like. Okay, that's a good one. I'm Canadian, bud. I don't care about your weird two-party system. Statistically speaking to the US residents, of course. All you others get it. What's even with that two-party system, am I right? Weirdos. And you lost me again. OP has a talent. Not a particularly useful talent, but it is a talent. See, I just start typing. My brain and my fingers aren't exactly connected. I get distracted and off topic pretty quickly. Sue me. Actually, really quickly, did you know that Canada has legislation protecting the right to apologize as a simple act of empathy and not an admission of guilt? Anyway, so that was a paragraph worth of nothing basically to say that a few of my players were tired and antsy, and one in particular, we'll call him Stan, was already generally a shit disturber. He had gotten it into his head that the head of a church, like the Pope head, was actually evil. The Pope head. So we decided to sneak into the Pope's chambers and confront him with his evilness. Now, the fact that the Pope actually was evil is kind of besides the point. That the entire church was a scam, and the big bad evil god who had died in legend had actually just been broken apart, with his actual godhood becoming a new, less powerful deity, has really no bearing on my anger here. I was pissed because there were no clues, no telegraphs, no nothing. This was a shit disturber, disturbing shit, just for the fun of it. And he just so happened to do it in the worst possible way. The great big epic plot, I was too ambitious for my own good back then, that would result in my players literally recreating the world, was in jeopardy. So when Stan went after the Pope, dragging another player's character along with him, I mean dragged is the wrong word, that guy's a little rascal all on his own, we call him Turnip, they were rapidly approaching an extremely high-leveled villain head-on with his deepest secrets, while their allies slept unaware and vulnerable to retribution elsewhere in the church. So I killed them. It's the only goddamn time in my life that I have fucking murdered a player character without pause or regrets. Idiots. Yeah, OP, what a bunch of idiots that they didn't know the thing that you didn't signal to them in any way. God, what an asshole. But I didn't want to end the campaign there, so I had an ally sneak the rest of the party out of the church away from danger. I'm a big fan of things not happening in a vacuum. There are repercussions, ripples, and events to stuff that my players do in the world. Some of it's good, some of it is bad. A powerful evil villain thinking that the group is going to reveal his secrets? Yeah, bad. That's a bad one. Should have figured that out on your own. Not sure why I had to spell it out for you. See, I give OP a chuckle and then he throws it back in my face. Such a douche, bro. A reason that they would need to lay low, but an adventure compromised of a group of super recognizable heroes playing rummy in a safe house for months just didn't appeal to me. So I decided to actually send them underground for a while. And I gotta tell you, I was proud of what I came up with. OP? Proud? Imagine that. I'm proud of no other concept I came up with like I am with that adventure. The memory is bittersweet these days, considering how it all ended. We took a couple of weeks off so I could make an entirely new campaign. When we met up, their contact told them that he had a job that would send them underground for a while, and that he had a map for them. I proceeded to hand them about 40 pages of loose leaf paper filled with writing, and apologized out of character saying that it was only about half done. My players were confused, so I explained. Centuries ago, a dwarven expedition set forth through the Underdark in search of a legendary material known as black water. The water is said to have infinite, untold power. 100 dwarves set out, one returned with the vial, and that vial was secreted away by the Dwarven clan. But in the years that followed, they accomplished some of the most legendary feats that the world had ever seen, and it was on good authority that their engines of myth were powered by that single vial. If they could make a way to the source, a mystical pump that will flow a regular supply back to the surface could be set up, and in the time they were gone, their contact would use his substantial resources to settle things down for a safe return. The water was a MacGuffin. The real point was the adventure and the map that I gave them. It was a journal from an apprentice scribe of the Dwarven expedition detailing their journey. It was written entirely in character, with all the knowledge of the journeyman. It described threats and challenges, but sometimes only vaguely and sometimes incorrectly. It even used certain Dwarven words untranslated, as there was no English equivalent, forcing my players to try and suss out their meaning from the context. I thought it was a brilliant opportunity to fester some dread into the party and just generally have fun with the format. They were of course free to try a different path, but they might not get there, or they might encounter something worse than what the journal had described. I had a few emergency contingency plans in place if they did, but the journal was a guaranteed path. Over the course of this adventure, I had added about another 20 pages and still had about 20-ish to go. It would have detailed the whole doomed affair, and it was a lot of fun to make. But there was a wrinkle. The contact sent them to meet an associate of his who had the pump, an NPC named Wong. When they met Wong halfway en route to the delve site, they discovered that he was a great big bald warrior. Wong was actually evil. Actually, Wong was actually dead. This was a Grigori, a character one of the party had actually met before, but that character had retired to deal with the god of the undead hating his fucking guts. Seriously, don't play with a deck of many things. And the player didn't recognize his description. He was planning on killing the whole party in revenge for their slights to his brothers, whom they had also previously met and kinda killed on one occasion. So this is gonna be fun. Madars, aboleths, and dows, and rolling balls of fungi that melted your insides with sudden betrayal thrown into the mix. We're all set for the next dozen sessions or so. The party consisted of a glorious cleric, and also the old stalwart bard, who lasted from session 1, both played by Eric, a badass bitch of a cleric played by Rod, a dwarven attaché played by Brandon, and a druid played by Ross. I think there was something else, I don't know. A lot from that campaign has been overshadowed in my memory in the intervening years. I'd like to pause right here for one moment and describe myself as a DM for a second. I grew up when D&D was hard, like gay porn hard. Okay. Experience was fought for. Levels were magnificent achievements unto themselves. Challenges were frequent and rough, and treasure was random. You rolled. That will become depressingly relevant in just a moment. So they're following the map. It first describes how the Dwarven expedition spent a month building an elevator down a 500-foot underground cliff, and during that time something was moving through the stone and snatching dwarves. So they fuck right past Madar before it can really mess with them, and the elevator is rotted away. I'm not going to get into every little thing. I just wanted to express that there were indeed some challenges. Luckily, I had a few good players, not Ross, who were quite adept with some creative thinking. Believe me. Seriously, you gotta believe. Anyhow, they randomly roll for treasure after one encounter results in them finding the monster's hoard. One of the rolls is for some drums. Who here has actually encountered a cursed item of any substance? Like something that will really fuck up a game. Hopefully not many. A cursed item here or there is a funny enough thing, but a DM should know better than to introduce something that can really gum up the works. Seriously, don't play around with a deck of many things. The group could identify magic items. They weren't high enough level to remove curses. They all agreed to wait until they had refreshed their spells to identify everything. And then watch came, and Brandon decides he just can't wait. On his watch, he decides to play with the bongos. because they look like bongos. They were drums of deafening. I ask him how he plays with them, because I'm a big DM wearing his big boy pants, and I make the decisions, no matter how terrible. You play with the cursed item, you're gonna get the curse. Literally no common sense is what I'm getting at. Brandon drums his palms on his knees, doing a little beat. Ba-ba-da-ba-bum. Hitting each palm in turn against the respective knee in succession, back and forth. And I started to relax until he finishes off with hitting both palms down against both knees simultaneously, thereby officially activating the curse. Everyone within a certain radius is immediately made deaf, permanently. Restoration is needed, which they can't cast. Fuck me. What fun. Brandon's dwarf realizes he can't hear anymore, puts the drums back, and promptly goes to sleep in order to act just as fucking confused as all the other characters in the morning. Asshole after my own heart, that one. Okay, so the party is permanently deaf, in the Underdark, only a quarter of the way through, with no way back the way they came because they can't swim up a rushing waterfall. One of Ross's few good plays was saving everyone from drowning by parting the water so they could actually climb out. I can work with this, but you know what? Wong, he needs to go. I can't have my players get betrayed now. There's something going around and no one has any penicillin. They got enough to deal with right now, and they don't need a backstabbing by a demigod. Oh, he was a demigod, kind of. That's good information to have. So one night, while the party is camped by a river, I have Grawangi just start fucking cursing him out. They obviously can't hear him, and he hates them. So he takes the opportunity to just lay into him and say how much he's going to murder them. It's a lot. He's planning on doing a lot of murder to them. They're deaf, I hear you exclaim. How does him threatening to kill them reveal anything? Well, if you settle down, I'll tell you. Someone could lip read? No, but seriously, stop interrupting and I'll tell you. We could sit here all day and keep guessing, or, I could get on with it. Oh, please, God, get on with it. I've been writing this crap for a week now. It's time to head home with this shit, so zip it for 2 more seconds and I will indeed tell you. Ross. Ross could technically hear. As a druid, he had a familiar. Unlike in 5th, or maybe other editions, I don't know much about 3rd or 4th because those kind of passed me by, familiars were actual animals summoned from the wilderness and not some spiritual what's-it given physical form. Ross had summoned a familiar in the Underdark and had gotten a bat, and through the familiar he could experience its senses. And thankfully, Ross had made a point of saying he was sending his bat off to go hunt that night, so that it was out of the range of those drums. If he hadn't, he'd be permanently stuck with a deaf bat as his familiar, with no way to replace it. So thank fuck he sent it away, or he'd be deaf as a bat. So it all comes down to Ross. Never has a more disappointing sentence been written by my hand. Ross, through his bat, hears the muttering. He can't quite make out the noise as it's low and the river is loud, but he distinctly hears threats to murder each and every member of the party. Well, everyone except Wangori. Figure that's enough to put 1 and 1 together. That's right, I had learned nothing. That was about to change, with a few simple words to be spoken in just a few moments. Ross wakes everyone up to warn them about what he's heard. Okay, this is it. They're gonna discover Wangori's evil and big fight and huzzas and back to our regularly scheduled nightmare. And then Ross, ever so delicately, placed the cherry atop this whole mess.
The river is evil.
Huh?
The river is evil. I heard it muttering that it wanted to kill us.
Fucking excuse me?
The river is evil.
I know what I did was dumb and rough. I thought I could spin it into something fun, and that was what he had come up with. Everyone else around the table had figured it out already, but Ross was the only one who could hear. Everyone was relying on him as their ears. Oh God, everyone was relying on him. The completion of this campaign relied on Ross. You know that shot in horror movies where they dolly in while also zooming out to really fuck with the perspective? I felt that then. The river was evil. I immediately lost all confidence in my ability to run that campaign. I was done. Fucked had been too shit at that point, and I needed to do the mercy of just putting a bullet behind the ear of my campaign because clearly no one else was going to do it. A few days later, I let everyone know that I didn't think the campaign could continue. There were some token, half-hearted assurances of, nah, dog, it's still good and stuff, but in truth, we all saw the writing on the wall. It was hard to miss, spelled 100 times over in letters 50 feet tall. People called nerds, they go the house. Wait, my Latin's a little off. I mean to say, the game was over. Listen, I don't know what you wanted from me. If you expected to go out on Ross with a bang, you've never heard him whimper. Not every RPG horror story needs to be about one person being indignant or incredulous at other people's fuckery. Every time you point a finger, there's 3 others pointing right back at you. We should all learn to look inwards and finger ourselves. Every once in a while. Let he who is without idiocy cast the first firebolt and all that. No, this was my horror story. Ross just had a walk-on part in the background. Sure, he pooped his pants and ran off screen. But it was all in the background on another TV show. I was the bad actor, casually chewing the scenery, front and center. I probably got a couple more horror stories in me, but they don't feature Ross, and I'm gonna take a break. Maybe check out Ross's Facebook page, see what he's getting up to. We are still friends on Facebook. I don't want to talk about it. I know I'm sick. And so, that's it. Hope that whatever this is turned out to meet your expectations, and if it didn't, well, I'm sorry. And that's a simple expression of empathy, not an admission of guilt. Stay in school. Edit. TLDR. It takes a village to ruin a game. And corrected a thing too. God, man, so it's still basically a complete tie. Ross thinks the river is evil. He's still not able to put 2 and 2 together, which just must be incredibly frustrating for both the DM and the party. Okay, I get that. But then there's also the DM sending people on this, like, extremely elaborate quest. The whole point is just to get them underground and away from the big bad evil guy. So who's really worse? Is anyone worse? I gotta call it a tie. I didn't like OP, but I also didn't like Ross. But for different reasons, you know? OP is actively, like, way too serious. He's like,
D&D is serious business, guys.
while Ross is just kind of a simple idiot, incapable of picking up the clues that are laid down right in front of him. So with those 2 definitions in mind, I guess I will have to say that I dislike OP slightly more at the end of the day. We're all sitting around to play imagination with math rocks, okay? It's not that serious. Let the guy climb on the ceiling, let him think that the river is evil, and try and incorporate that in some way. It sounds like he was just throwing you twists and turns, and you didn't really know how to deal with them as a dungeon master. And OP, he's prepared as hell. He's got an 80-sheet booklet on what to do in the Underdark, but he can't catch a curveball to save his life. And that's a frustrating part for me. I don't know, man. I'm probably not super eager to jump back into another RPG horror story just because I don't feel like this one delivered with a bang. You know, something like Ramtide and the Adelaide saga. That was only 5 parts and it delivered such a bang. This was how many parts? Like almost 10. And I still feel like it went out. It's just like, yep, that's the end. Okay, bye everybody. So, a little bit disappointed, but not more so than I've come to expect from this OP, I suppose. So, whether you just watched the beefy final episode or the ultra beefy compilation of this video. I just want you to know that I appreciate you guys watching, and I do hope that you will like, comment, and or subscribe. Maybe share this video around if you should like, particularly if you know somebody that loves D&D and cringe, all mashed together. I also hope you'll check out the links in the description. Me and my wife's channel, Mr. and Mrs. ReddX, my personal subreddit, r/ReddXReads, Teespring if you're trying to rock the merch, Amazon affiliate, currently goes to my microphone, but if you click through there, buy basically anything else on Amazon, I get kicked back a little bit of cash for that, so I definitely appreciate it. We've also got social medias, like the Discord and the Twitter and the Facebook, oh, and my gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful, generous patrons, of course. I would like to thank them all, but especially ZeroMMX, Lady Nix, Robert Waits, Pope Squid, Cider Drinker, Tato Ferret, The Last Shinobi, Mark 211, Aaron W, Mitch, John Hero, Candy Sora, Fire Drake, Little Lone Wolf, Miss Monday, Silent Revolver, J.M. Coon, Leon Ebers, TSM Kirby, Redwind, Synaptic Boomstick, Jerry, Staples Yeet, Cake Jerry, that's a different Jerry, my boy Nat One Nick, Brilliant Tamago, that big delicious jelly donut, the one and only Livison, the OG James Cook, Papa Jesus, and Aaron Lennox. Thank you guys so much for helping me to live the dream. I don't know if we need to worry about monetization. OP does have kind of a potty mouth, you know, but I got like this self-certification on the channel, so hopefully I could just like be honest with YouTube and they'll let me get away with saying the bad words. I have yet to really find out how it works, but I'm hopeful at the very least. Regardless, if you guys would like to help push back against demonetization, I hope that you will join these lovely people in supporting the channel, and I thank you very, very much in advance for that. But if you can't do it right now, it just ain't in the cards or something like that, don't sweat it too hard, friends. I just appreciate you coming on through, hanging out with me, and I hope that you'll come on back and hang out with me again tomorrow, because really, the views is how my beard stays so buttered. In order to join us, you'll need to keep yourself safe out there, wash your hands, but also take some time out and do something that you personally enjoy today. Maybe watching some more of them ReddX sagas. Oh, that's so beefy. That's good stuff. Always remember, friends, that you are loved, you are worthy, and you definitely, definitely deserve it. I will see you in the next one. And until then, friends, bye-bye.